I've spent the last 5 years of my life looking into the eyes of millions of people who see me as Jesus Christ. 5 years of playing the most perfect man who ever walked this earth. And if there's one thing I've learned from portraying the Son of God, it's this shocking truth that nobody talks about: the closer you get to perfection on screen, the more painfully aware you become of how broken you are in real life. I'm Jonathan Roumie, and yes, I'm the guy who plays Jesus in The Chosen. But what I'm about to tell you will completely shatter everything you think you know about faith, fame, and finding love in Hollywood. Because here's what nobody tells you about playing Jesus Christ: it doesn't make you holy. It doesn't make you perfect. And it certainly doesn't make dating any easier. In fact, it does the exact opposite. Every single night for the past 5 years, I've come home from set, washed off the makeup, taken off the robes, and sat in my empty apartment wondering if God is playing some cosmic joke on me. Here I am, bringing the greatest love story ever told to millions of screens around the world, showing people what unconditional love looks like, and I can't even get a second date. But that's not even the most shocking part. The most shocking part is what happened to me 3 months ago that completely changed everything I thought I knew about love, about God's plan for my life, and about what I'm really supposed to be looking for in the woman I want to marry. It was a moment so profound, so unexpected, that it made me realize I've been searching for love in all the wrong places, with all the wrong expectations, for all the wrong reasons. You see, playing Jesus taught me something that no theology class, no Bible study, no prayer group ever could. It taught me that love isn't about finding someone who thinks you're perfect. Real love, the kind that Jesus himself demonstrated, is about finding someone who sees all your flaws, all your humanity, all your brokenness, and chooses to love you anyway. And that realization hit me like a lightning bolt when I least expected it. I'm 50 years old, and I'm tired of pretending that being single in Hollywood as a man of faith is some kind of blessing in disguise. I'm tired of people telling me that God is just preparing me for something special. I'm tired of women treating me like I'm either too holy to touch or too famous to be real. But most of all, I'm tired of lying to myself about what I really want. Because what I want is simple, beautiful, and apparently harder to find than I ever imagined. After years of failed relationships, awkward dates where women confess their sins to me over dinner, and countless nights wondering if my calling meant I was destined to be alone, I finally discovered the truth about what I'm really looking for in my future wife. And it's not what you think. It's not what I thought. And it's definitely not what the Christian dating books tell you to look for. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. The answer was hidden in plain sight the entire time. It was in every scene I filmed, every prayer I said as Jesus, every moment I spent trying to understand unconditional love. The woman I'm meant to marry, the qualities I need in a partner, the kind of love that will actually work for a man like me, it was all there, waiting for me to see it. And when I finally did, everything changed. Stay with me because what I'm about to share with you over the next 30 minutes will challenge everything you think you know about faith and relationships, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why my search for love had to break me completely before it could heal me forever. Let me take you back to where this all began, because what I discovered about my future wife actually started with a lie I told myself for over 15 years. It was 2003, I was 39 years old, and I was living in New York City chasing my acting dreams like every other hopeful performer in Manhattan. I had completely walked away from my Catholic faith. Not gradually, not quietly, but with the arrogance of a man who thought he knew better than 2,000 years of wisdom. I looked at religion as this outdated institution that was holding me back from living the life I wanted to live. And the life I wanted to live included Sarah. Sarah was this brilliant, ambitious theater director with piercing green eyes and a laugh that could fill an entire room. She was everything I thought I wanted in a woman: independent, artistic, passionate about her work, and completely uninterested in anything remotely spiritual. We met during an off-Broadway production where I was playing a small role, and she was assistant directing. The chemistry was instant, electric, the kind of connection that makes you forget everything else exists. For 2 years, we built what I thought was the perfect relationship. We'd spend hours in coffee shops talking about art, about theater, about changing the world through storytelling. We'd walk through Central Park at midnight discussing philosophy and dreams. She challenged my mind, supported my career, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had found my person. We moved in together, talked about marriage, even looked at engagement rings. I was convinced I was going to spend the rest of my life with this woman. But then something happened that I didn't see coming. My father got sick. Really sick. And suddenly, all those philosophical conversations about life and meaning became brutally real. I found myself wanting to pray, needing to pray, but feeling completely lost because I had abandoned that part of myself so long ago. Sarah watched me struggle, watched me reach for something she couldn't understand, and I could see the distance growing between us. She'd roll her eyes when I mentioned wanting to go to Massachusetts. She'd change the subject when I tried to talk about faith. The woman I thought was perfect for me couldn't accept the part of me that was crying out for God. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday night in November. My father had just been rushed to the hospital, and I was sitting in that sterile waiting room, terrified and alone. I called Sarah, expecting comfort, expecting her to drop everything and come be with me. Instead, she told me she had a rehearsal she couldn't miss and that I needed to stop using religion as a crutch. In that moment, staring at those fluorescent lights and listening to the woman I loved tell me that my desperate search for God was weakness, I realized something that would change the trajectory of my entire life. I realized I had been lying to myself about what love really meant. I thought love was about finding someone who accepted the version of myself I wanted to be, not the person I actually was. Sarah loved the ambitious, secular actor Jonathan. But she couldn't love the broken, searching, faithful man I was becoming. And that night in the hospital, as my father fought for his life and the woman I planned to marry dismissed my spiritual crisis, I understood my first crucial lesson about what I needed in a future wife. A real partner doesn't just love your strengths and your dreams. She loves your questions, your doubts, your desperate midnight prayers, and your journey back to God. She doesn't see your faith as competition for her love. She sees it as the foundation that makes you capable of loving her the way she deserves to be loved. Sarah couldn't understand that the man who needed God was the same man who could love her completely, and that broke my heart in ways I didn't even know were possible. We broke up 3 weeks later. My father recovered, thank God, and I started going back to Massachusetts. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally admitted I didn't have any answers at all. And that admission, that humility, that willingness to be vulnerable before God, taught me something profound about the kind of woman I was really meant to love. But what I learned next about dating as a newly faithful man in New York City was even more shocking, and it set me up for the biggest mistake of my dating life. What happened next completely blindsided me, and it started with a phone call that I almost didn't answer. It was December 2017, I was 43 years old, and I had spent the last few years trying to date within Catholic circles, thinking I had figured out the formula for finding my future wife. I thought the answer was simple, just find a good Catholic girl who loves God, and everything would fall into place. I couldn't have been more wrong, and the mistake I was about to make would leave me more confused about love than ever before. Her name was Maria, and she seemed like everything I thought I was looking for. She went to daily mass, volunteered at her parish, could quote scripture better than most priests I knew. On paper, she was perfect. She was beautiful, devout, came from a good family, and everyone in our Catholic young adults group thought we were meant for each other. We dated for 8 months, and I was convinced I had finally cracked the code on Christian dating. We prayed together, went to mass together, talked about raising Catholic children together. I even started looking at engagement rings. But there was something missing, something I couldn't put my finger on. Our conversations felt scripted, like we were both performing the roles of good Catholic couple rather than actually connecting as human beings. She never challenged me, never questioned anything, never showed me a side of herself that wasn't perfectly polished and holy. And the more I got to know her, the more I realized she had fallen in love with the idea of me, the Catholic convert actor who would make a good Catholic husband, not with who I actually was as a person. The relationship ended when she told me that my struggles with doubt and my questions about faith made her uncomfortable. She wanted a man who had it all figured out spiritually, who could be her spiritual leader without any cracks in his armor. She couldn't handle the fact that sometimes I wrestled with God, sometimes I had dark nights of the soul, sometimes I felt lost and needed her support. She wanted a saint, not a partner. That breakup devastated me because it made me question everything I thought I knew about faith and love. If a devout Catholic woman couldn't love me with my spiritual struggles, then what kind of woman could? I spent months wondering if I was asking for too much, if my expectations were unrealistic, if maybe I was meant to be alone. And then, on a cold January morning in 2018, my phone rang. The caller ID said, Dallas Jenkins, a name I didn't recognize. I almost sent it to voicemail because I was running late for an audition. But something made me answer, and that decision changed the entire trajectory of my life. Dallas told me about this project called The Chosen, about wanting to create the most authentic portrayal of Jesus Christ ever filmed, and asked if I would be interested in auditioning for the role of Jesus. I remember laughing, thinking it was some kind of joke. Play Jesus? I was a struggling actor who couldn't even figure out how to date properly, and someone wanted me to portray the Son of God? But Dallas was serious, and 2 months later, after the most intense audition process of my life, I got the call that would change everything. I was going to play Jesus Christ in what would become the most successful Christian series in history. But here's what nobody prepared me for. The moment that news went public, my dating life didn't just get complicated, it became virtually impossible. Within weeks of the announcement, my entire social media blew up. Suddenly, every woman who had ever rejected me was sliding into my DMs, telling me they always knew I was special. Women I'd never met were sending me messages saying they felt called by God to be with me. I was getting marriage proposals from strangers who thought dating TV Jesus would get them closer to heaven. The first date I went on after booking The Chosen was with a woman I met through friends. We went to a nice restaurant, and everything seemed normal until she started confessing her sins to me over appetizers. She literally thought that because I played Jesus, I could give her absolution. When I tried to explain that I was just an actor, she looked disappointed and said she thought God had brought us together for a reason. The date ended with her asking if I could pray over her bread to bless it. But the worst part wasn't the crazy fan encounters or the women who wanted to date Jesus instead of Jonathan. The worst part was how it affected my relationship with God. Here I was being handed the greatest honor any Christian actor could imagine, and instead of feeling blessed, I felt more alone than ever. Every time I put on those robes, every time I said those sacred words, I was reminded that I was playing the perfect man while my own life felt like a complete mess. I started questioning if God was testing me, if maybe this role was supposed to teach me that I didn't need human love because I had divine love. I wondered if playing Jesus meant I was supposed to live like Jesus, single, celibate, completely devoted to ministry. The isolation was crushing, and the irony wasn't lost on me that I was bringing the greatest love story ever told to millions of people while feeling like love was impossible in my own life. But what I discovered during the filming of Season 1 was something that would completely revolutionize my understanding of what I was really looking for in a future wife, and it came from the most unexpected source imaginable. The unexpected source of revelation came from a 7-year-old girl named Emma, and what she taught me about love in 30 seconds shattered everything I thought I knew about finding my future wife. But before I tell you about that life-changing moment, let me explain the spiritual crisis that was tearing me apart during the first season of The Chosen. Because what happened to my faith while playing Jesus was the exact opposite of what everyone expected, and it nearly broke me completely. You'd think that spending months studying the Gospels, memorizing Jesus' words, and portraying his love would make me feel closer to God. And in many ways, it did. My prayer life deepened beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I found myself having actual conversations with Jesus, not just reciting memorized prayers. I understood Scripture in ways that went straight to my heart instead of just my head. But here's the devastating irony. The closer I got to understanding God's perfect love, the more painfully aware I became of how far I was from experiencing it in my own life. Every day on set, I would deliver lines about love, forgiveness, and God's plan for our lives. I would look into the camera and speak Jesus' words about how much the Father loves us, how we're never alone, how God has beautiful plans for our future. And then I would go home to my empty apartment, eat dinner alone, and wonder why God's beautiful plan for my life seemed to include everyone else finding love except me. The contradiction was eating me alive. I started having these intense conversations with God that bordered on arguments. I'd be in my trailer between takes, still wearing Jesus's robes, asking God why he would give me this incredible ministry but leave me so isolated personally. I felt like Abraham, willing to sacrifice everything for God, but wondering if the promise of a future was ever going to come true. The harder I prayed for a wife, the more alone I felt. The more I trusted God's timing, the more I questioned if his timing included me ever having a family. Then came the dating attempts within the Christian entertainment industry, and they were even more disastrous than before. I met a woman at a Christian film festival who seemed perfect. She was an actress, understood the industry, shared my faith. We went on 3 dates, and I thought we had a real connection. Until she told me that she'd been praying about us and felt like God was calling her to help me with my ministry by becoming my wife. She didn't love me, she loved the idea of being part of the chosen story. She saw our potential marriage as a spiritual assignment, not a romance. Another time, I was set up by a mutual friend with a wonderful woman who worked in Christian publishing. She was intelligent, kind, deeply faithful, and I was genuinely excited about getting to know her. But every conversation somehow turned into her analyzing my portrayal of Jesus. She'd quote my own lines back to me, ask me what Jesus would do in various situations, and wanted me to pray over every decision in her life. She couldn't separate Jonathan from the character I played, and eventually admitted that she felt like dating me was the closest she could get to dating Jesus himself. The breaking point came during filming season 2. There's a scene where Jesus talks to Mary Magdalene about how love casts out fear, how real love doesn't condemn but liberates, how the Father's love is big enough to heal any wound. As I delivered those lines, looking into the actress's eyes and speaking about this transformative love, I felt this overwhelming wave of grief wash over me. Here I was, teaching the world about perfect love while feeling like I was fundamentally unlovable myself. That night, I had the most honest conversation with God I'd ever had. I got on my knees in my hotel room and told him everything. I told him I was tired of being strong, tired of having faith, tired of trusting his timing. I told him that playing Jesus was both the greatest honor and the greatest torture of my life, because every day I had to speak about a love I was starting to believe I'd never experience. I told him that if his plan for me was to be single forever, I needed him to take away this desire for marriage because it was destroying me. And that's when something shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks, but with a quiet certainty that settled into my heart. I felt God whisper to my spirit that my desire for love wasn't a distraction from my ministry, it was part of it. That my longing for a wife wasn't selfish, it was human. And that everything I was learning about love through playing Jesus wasn't meant to make me feel inadequate, but to prepare me to recognize the right kind of love when it came. But the real breakthrough came the next day during a fan event, when little Emma changed everything I thought I knew about what love actually looks like. She walked up to me with her parents, looked me straight in the eye, and said something that would revolutionize my entire understanding of what I should be looking for in my future wife. What she said was so simple, so profound, that it made me realize I'd been searching for love in completely the wrong way, and the woman I'm meant to marry has been right there in my prayers all along. I just hadn't been asking God the right questions. Emma looked up at me with bright, innocent eyes and said, "Mr. Jesus, do you have a wife like the real Jesus loves the church?" Her parents started apologizing, but I knelt down and asked what she meant. She said, "My mommy told me that Jesus loves the church like a husband loves a wife, so if you're playing Jesus, you should have someone who loves Jesus like you do, not someone who just thinks you are Jesus." Then she skipped away, leaving my entire worldview crumbling. Out of the mouths of babes. This 7-year-old had just solved what decades of prayer hadn't taught me. I had been looking for someone who would love me as TV Jesus, or despite playing Jesus. But what I really needed was someone who loved the real Jesus so much that she could see him working through my life and love me for being his imperfect instrument, not his perfect representation. That night, I completely rewrote my prayers about finding a wife. Instead of asking God to send me someone who could handle my fame, I started asking Him to prepare my heart to recognize the woman who was already walking with Him independently. I realized I needed someone whose own relationship with God was so strong that together we could serve Him more powerfully than either of us could alone. This shift changed everything about how I approached dating. Instead of looking for someone impressed by my role, I started noticing women passionate about their own God-given purposes. Instead of seeking someone who wanted to be part of my ministry, I started praying for someone who had her own ministry that could beautifully intersect with mine. The first woman I met after this revelation was Rebecca. I found her at a charity event for homeless veterans, not because it was a Christian event or because she knew I'd be there, but because she'd been volunteering with veterans for 5 years. When someone told her I played Jesus on TV, her response was, "Oh, that's nice. Could you help me carry these care packages?" For the first time in years, I had a conversation with a woman who wasn't trying to impress me spiritually. Rebecca talked about her work with passion, asked me about interests outside of acting, and when faith came up naturally, she shared her struggles alongside her beliefs. She was real, authentic, unpolished in the most beautiful way. We dated for 3 months, the healthiest relationship I'd had since become famous. Rebecca loved God deeply, but she also loved her work, her family, and eventually me, not because I played Jesus, but because she saw how my faith shaped my character. She challenged me to grow and supported my career without being consumed by it. But Rebecca also taught me something painful about God's timing. She got a job offer in London that was too good to pass up, and we both realized we were meant to help each other grow, not necessarily grow old together. She left me with a gift more valuable than a relationship. She showed me what it felt like to be loved for who I was, not what I represented. After Rebecca, I thought I had figured out the formula. But what I discovered next completely blindsided me and revealed the one quality in a future wife that I never saw coming, the quality that would determine whether our love could weather the unique storms that come with my calling. That discovery happened 3 months ago, and it changed everything I thought I knew about what my future wife really needs to possess to build a life with a man like me. 3 months ago, everything changed because of one conversation with Elena, our script supervisor. I was filming the scene where Jesus comforts Mary and Martha after Lazarus dies, and I noticed Elena quietly crying not from the performance, but because she just lost her grandmother and was struggling with her faith like never before. What Elena did next revealed the one quality I never knew I needed in a future wife. Instead of asking TV Jesus for comfort, she challenged me. She questioned how I could speak beautiful words about God's love when sometimes life feels like God isn't listening. She needed me to be real with her, not holy. She treated me like a fellow human being navigating struggles, not like I had special access to divine mysteries. We talked for 4 hours in my trailer that night. Elena shared her doubts, her anger at God, her fears about faith. And instead of feeling pressure to have answers, I felt permission to share my own struggles, my loneliness, my questions about God's timing, my fear of being alone forever. We found God together in our broken humanity, and I realized what I absolutely must have in my future wife. She has to be brave enough to see me as human first and let me be human with her. She can't put me on a spiritual pedestal. She needs to love me enough to question me, challenge me, even be angry with me when life doesn't make sense. The right woman won't be intimidated by my role, she'll be empowered by it to help me become the man God created me to be. After all these years of searching, I finally know exactly what I'm looking for in my future wife. First, she must have her own authentic relationship with God that doesn't depend on me. I need someone who talks to Jesus directly, not someone who thinks dating me gets her closer to heaven. Her faith has to be real enough to survive doubt and humble enough to admit when she doesn't have answers. Second, she has to see Jonathan first and the guy from The Chosen second. I need someone who falls in love with the man who burns dinner and gets nervous before auditions, not someone impressed by who I am on screen. Third, she must be secure enough in her own purpose to let me be insecure sometimes. My future wife has to understand that strength sometimes looks like admitting weakness, and faith sometimes includes doubt. Fourth, she needs the courage to challenge me and hold me accountable. I don't want a wife who agrees with everything because she thinks I'm holy. I want someone who loves me enough to tell me when I'm wrong. And finally, she must understand that loving me means loving the calling that comes with me. Not sacrificing her dreams for mine, but seeing how God can use our love story to point others toward his love story. But here's what might surprise you. All these qualities mean nothing without that mysterious spark that makes two people choose each other every day. Chemistry matters. Attraction matters. Laughter matters. Because I don't want to marry a ministry partner, I want to marry the woman I can't imagine living without, who just happens to share my heart for serving God. The woman I'm meant to marry is out there somewhere, living her life, loving God, becoming who he's preparing her to be. And when we meet, it won't be because she was looking for me, it will be because we were both looking for him, and he decided it was time for our paths to cross. So here I am, Jonathan Roumie, 50 years old, playing Jesus by day and praying for my future wife by night. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of that anymore. Because I finally understand that my desire for marriage isn't a distraction from my calling, it's part of it. If you're watching this and you've been told your standards are too high, that your faith makes you undateable, that maybe God is calling you to singleness, I want you to hear something that took me 20 years to learn. God doesn't give us desires he doesn't intend to fulfill. That longing in your heart for true love isn't despite him, it's from him. I spent years thinking that because I played Jesus, I should be above human needs like companionship. But the same God who said, "It is not good for man to be alone," is the same God who called me to portray his Son. Those callings don't contradict each other, they complete each other. To every woman watching who's wondering if you could ever be enough for someone in ministry, who's been told you're too much or not holy enough, you are exactly who God is preparing for someone. Your questions don't disqualify you. Your struggles don't make you unworthy. Your humanity might be exactly what your future husband needs to help him stay real. And to everyone who's been waiting, praying, wondering if God has forgotten your heart's desire for love, he hasn't. God's timing isn't about making us wait until we're perfect. It's about preparing us to love imperfectly but completely. I don't know when I'll meet her. I don't know if she's watching this right now or if she's never heard of The Chosen. But I know that when our eyes meet, it will be because God decided we were both ready to love the way he loves, with patience, kindness, and hope that never gives up. What I do know is this: I'm finally ready. Ready to be vulnerable again. Ready to trust again. Ready to love a woman not because she completes me, but because she chooses to walk alongside the complete man God is still shaping me to become. So to my future wife, wherever you are, I'm here, I'm waiting, and I'm becoming the man worthy of the love you have to give. Keep following him with your whole heart. Keep believing your story isn't over. And when God decides it's time for our paths to cross, I promise you this: I will see you for exactly who you are, love you for exactly who you're becoming, and spend every day showing you that choosing love was the best decision we ever made. Because real love isn't finding someone perfect, it's finding someone worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth believing in even when the world tells you to give up hope. And I haven't given up hope. Not on love, not on God's plan, and certainly not on the beautiful woman he's preparing to share this journey with me. If this story gave you hope, if it reminded you that your desires for love matter to God, then hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe because your story matters too.